Have you ever heard of a book so controversial, so packed with drama and history, that some decided it shouldn't be read by everyone? Today, we read diving into the mystery of the books of the Maccabees and uncovering why these ancient texts became a major point of contention. This isn't just old history. It's a story of rebellion, faith, and a decision that shaped the Bible as many know it today. So, what are the books of the Maccabees? There are actually four of them, but the first two are the most famous. They tell the incredible story of a Jewish revolt in the 2nd century BC. Imagine this: a powerful king, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, storms into Judea. He's not just conquering, he's trying to erase Jewish culture entirely. He desecrates the holy Second Temple in Jerusalem, setting up an altar to Zeus and even sacrificing a pig there, a massive insult. He forbids circumcision, the observance of the Sabbath, and the study of the Torah. It was a dark, desperate time. Many people complied out of fear, but one family, led by a priest named Mattathias and his 5 sons, said no more. This was the beginning of the Maccabean Revolt. The name Maccabee itself means the hammer, a nickname given to one of the sons, Judah, for his fierce fighting style. First Maccabees is like a historical war journal. It's written in a straightforward, almost journalistic style. It details the military campaigns, the guerrilla tactics, and the blow-by-blow account of how this small band of rebels took on a massive empire. It's a story of incredible courage and strategy. They fought against impossible odds, reclaiming their land and their freedom. The climax? The Maccabees retake Jerusalem, cleanse the defiled temple, and rededicate it to God. This very event is what is celebrated every year during the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. The miracle of the oil that burned for 8 days is a beautiful story associated with this rededication. Now, Second Maccabees tells a similar story, but from a completely different angle. It's more dramatic, more theological. It focuses less on the military tactics and more on the reasons behind the suffering and the rewards of faithfulness. This is where we find some of the most powerful and controversial ideas. Second Maccabees talks explicitly about the resurrection of the dead, divine intervention in battles, and the idea of praying for the souls of the departed so they can be freed from sin. It includes the harrowing story of a mother and her 7 sons who choose martyrdom over betraying their faith. These are concepts that would become hugely important in later Christian and Jewish thought, but at the time, they were still being debated. So, if these books contain such heroic stories and important ideas, why were they banned, or, more accurately, excluded from some versions of the Bible? The answer lies in a complex history of language, timing, and theology. The key moment happened around the end of the 1st century AD. Jewish scholars were in the process of finalizing the canon of the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament. One of the main criteria they used was language. They decided to primarily include books that were originally written in Hebrew. The problem? First and Second Maccabees were primarily preserved in Greek, in a collection known as the Septuagint. Although First Maccabees was likely written in Hebrew first, that original version was lost to history. Because the surviving and most widely used versions were Greek, they were left out of the official Hebrew canon. This decision had a ripple effect. When early Christians started putting together their Bible, they heavily relied on the Septuagint, that Greek translation. So, for the early church, the Maccabees were in. They were considered part of the scripture. This is why, to this day, the books of the Maccabees are included in the Bibles used by Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Christians. They call these books deuterocanonical, meaning second canon, acknowledging their later acceptance but still considering them inspired scripture. But the story doesn't end there. Fast forward to the 16th century and the Protestant Reformation. Leaders like Martin Luther wanted to return to the original sources. When looking at the Old Testament, they decided to follow the Hebrew canon, the one that had excluded the Maccabees centuries before. Luther argued that while books like Maccabees were good and useful to read for historical context, they weren't on the same level as inspired scripture. He and other reformers placed them in a separate section between the Old and New Testaments called the Apocrypha, which means hidden things. Over time, as Bibles were printed and distributed, this Apocrypha section was often omitted entirely, especially in Protestant versions, to save on printing costs and to reflect the theological stance. And so, what was once a standard part of the scriptural collection for over 1,000 years became forbidden or lost knowledge for millions of people. It wasn't some grand conspiracy to hide a secret truth. Instead, it was a series of historical and theological decisions made by different groups at different times, each with their own reasons. The exclusion of the Maccabees had a huge impact. For those whose Bibles don't include them, a huge chunk of history is missing. That 400-year gap between the last prophet of the Old Testament and the arrival of John the Baptist. The Maccabees fill that void, explaining the political and religious climate that Jesus was born into. It shows us why there was such a strong desire for a Messiah to free the people from Roman rule, a sentiment directly echoing the Maccabean struggle against the Greeks. Whether you consider them divinely inspired scripture or just incredibly valuable historical documents, the books of the Maccabees are a treasure. They are a testament to the power of faith, the fight for freedom, and the enduring strength of a people who refuse to let their culture be extinguished. They offer a window into a pivotal moment in history that shaped the world we live in today. So, have you ever read the Maccabees? What are your thoughts on this fascinating piece of history? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's great textual mysteries. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you won't miss our next exploration. Until next time, stay curious.